the argument I think for sprinting is it's unique in what it can do for the body. They showed that just doing that 2 to 3 times a week, it was a total of like 6 to 9 minutes of effort. Showed, I think that was the one that showed 90% more fat loss and cardio. But the kicker was is that it was 30 times less time spent doing it. And so if you have a family, a longer run is going to cost you more family time. A longer bike is going to cost you more family time than a sprint session.
We all want to improve our lives, but sometimes it's hard to know where to start. Join us each week on the Stacking Habits podcast with your hosts, David, Matthew, and Caleb, as we uncover life-changing habits from inspiring people. Want to know the best part? You can then apply those habits to enrich your own life and move closer to your goals.
Hey, Kyle, I've got a question. So one of your life points is that you lived in a desert community with a group called the Sky Gypsies with John McAfee. Is that the John McAfee, the security guy?
Yeah.
He's kind of a wild guy, right?
Yeah. Well, not anymore. He's dead. But yeah.
Right.
He was on the run from the government for a while. I mean, he's pretty sure a billionaire. He became extremely wealthy from the McAfee thing. And so I just lived, he had this little desert commune where these guys, they traveled around on, if you can imagine a three-wheeled motorcycle with wings, they would fly around the desert and camp out and come back to this little kind of space. He originally formed it, I believe, as a religious cleansing center, so to cleanse people from religious thought. And so we had some great conversations, and I really enjoyed my time with him. It was a strange, kind of a little bit of a dream. It was a strange situation, but it was fun.
How big was this community? Like, did you know him personally?
I didn't. I sent him a message and said, "Hey, can I come out and live with you guys? I want to, this is after post-college football, and I was just trying stuff. As you saw that list, I was doing all manner of strange things. And so I said, hey, a Sky Gypsy group, maybe I can come out there and hang out, and I'll run your coffee shop. And they said, sure. And so I found some ride share and kind of hitchhiked out there and just showed up. And they're like, hey, you can stay here. And so he had all these kind of Airstream trailers for people when they would visit to stay in. So I stayed in this random Airstream in the desert for a while. I mean, like middle of the desert, almost like, uninhabitable, but really pretty, crazy stars at night.
Did you have any revelations while you were there? Did you experience anything? Did it, I guess, change the trajectory of your life in any way?
Maybe not that specific spot. I think it just, for me, added to, and a lot of those travels, and we can talk more about this, but I think I thought, like, I was committed to this idea of adventure, like I want to try stuff, experience stuff. And I think that's good. That's a good thing. But there's a limit, there's a limit. And for me, it felt like, when you spin around in a circle, you're technically seeing all angles, but you're really not looking at anything. And I felt a little bit like that like, man, I can keep exploring and hitchhiking and traveling and have these great memories, and I'm thankful for that. But really nobody, if you think about it, nobody could count on me. Like none of my friends could say, hey, Kyle, will you help me move this weekend? Hey man, can we get coffee next week? Like, I had lots of people were good friends to me, but I was not a good friend to those people because I was just kind of a traveling ghost. But yeah, I mean, good and bad, but I enjoyed it. But my revelation was that I think the real adventure comes in commitment and in relationships, not in, continually finding the next interesting spot. But I don't know.
We have a lot of directions we can go with that, but let's do a bit of a formal introduction. So welcome to the show. Kyle Horne is a good friend and someone I really enjoy chatting with. We've met several times over the last few years. We, of course, crossed over into the book space. But you live in Northwest Arkansas. One of my closest friends lives down there as well. And so usually I'm not much of a planner, but last minute I'll send you a text and say, hey, I'm going to be in town tomorrow. Do you want to meet up? And usually you do a good job of kind of clearing your schedule and coming out for, what ends up being a 2 or 3 hour coffee chat. But you are one of the more fascinating people I've met in terms of strategy, the variety of things you pursue, the way you intentionally live your life, and so that's one of the reasons we have you on the podcast today. So, welcome to the pod. Why don't you share just a little bit about your backgrounds, and then I've got a picture I want to bring up, and we'll start from there.
Yeah, great to be here. Great to be with you guys. Yeah. My name's Kyle. Background, from Florida, living here in Northwest Arkansas now. Met an Arkansas woman, and it's been a joy. We got married 8 years ago, and 3 kids now, one on the way, and yeah, got a few businesses, and yeah, just trying to keep these kids alive and try not to go bankrupt. Those are maybe two big goals.
Those are admirable goals. Let me share a photo here. I did a little bit of research because I knew what
Mm,
we were going to talk about today, and you probably know where this is headed. But let me pop up just a quick photo and see what kind of memories this brings back up for you.
yeah, there we are.
I think when I first met you, you actually had a little bit longer hair. I don't recall these luscious locks,
Hmm.
but it's kind of interesting reading the bio. It looks like a third grader just kind of wrote and trailed off and said a whole bunch of stuff. But looks like you were a state champion high school football player. You set some school records for 400-meter sprints or 400-yard sprints. I'm not sure which. So a lot of comments on you being an athlete, one of the fastest players on the team, and the habit we're gonna talk to you about today is relative to health and to physical health in specific. So let's go back to your days in high school in Wofford College, and sort of what role did athletics play? How'd you get into that? And how do you think that sort of launched you into where you are today?
Yeah. No, they played a big role for me. Went to a secular private school in high school, called Bowles, which is, it's kind of like Sparta. It's one of those schools that, known across the country for athletics, and it wins all these best, athletic programs in the state and the country awards. And so I got an interesting dose of what it looks like to really commit to a discipline early on. Played football, wrestling, track, weightlifting team. Interesting, the football team got a ton of clout because our coach had the most state championships in Florida history. He was kind of a legend in the area. But the swimming team, is better than the football team. They routinely would send kids to the Olympics, and then just bring them back to high school, because we had this kind of legendary swim program. And so this school kind of exposed me to, yeah, just a high level of sport commitment, that I think benefited me. And so from there, just because of that, I think part of that school reputation and the reputation of our coach, was able to get a scholarship to play football in college.
Now, did you come from a disciplined background with like your upbringing in your childhood, or is that something that you just took naturally to sport with your competitive spirit?
I think I didn't have an inherent, high discipline internally. I did find a few things that I just enjoyed, and it's easy to discipline things that you like doing. And so I did enjoy, getting stronger and faster. I like the measurables of that, and so was able to, yeah, discipline myself in those directions, and that benefited me in football. But I wouldn't say I was inherently just a disciplined kid. Probably still not.
So the Kyle I know today is quite disciplined, and seeing the fact that you played 3 sports at such a high level shows that you had a high level of discipline, and I would imagine a pretty good set of habits. Were you always that way, or take us back even further to your childhood and kind of the formative years? What was your family life like, and where did this love, either competition or of discipline, come from?
Yeah, I have fond memories of the 90s. You guys are maybe my age, a little younger, but in the 90s, I feel like it was special, right? You finish school. I feel like we had less homework than kids have nowadays. We'd finish school, we'd play all day. We didn't really have a lot of. We had a Nintendo. Probably played too much Nintendo, but really, your parents kind of kick you out, and they didn't know where we went all day. They didn't. We had to come back with the street lights, and on Saturdays we were playing every sport we could find and playing in the woods, and so I got to play a lot, and that's something that's a value that I feel like, especially for kids early on, creates a great foundation for discipline later because it teaches them to enjoy sport and enjoy these disciplines that later they can use to really commit to. Kids that specialize, this is a different topic we can talk about, but early specialization can really be a detriment to kids. And so for me, man, just getting able to play, exposure to a ton of sports. I had just a great crew of kids to ride around and play everything we could find. We set some things on fire too, and so that was probably, that's not a discipline I would encourage, but yeah.
I think we should pivot and actually just focus on that discipline.
Yeah.
Can you give us a 30-second story about setting something on fire?
Oh, yeah. So, kids playing in the woods, of course, what do? Let's light things on fire and put them out. And so, we were doing okay for a little while, and then at some point the fire got too big, and then we're like, okay, let's try and put it out with this pile of things. Well, that pile of things was straw, and so that didn't smother it. That just made it bigger, and so we sprinted. We saw that the fire in the woods was out of our control. So we sprinted to someone's house and got a bucket of water. By the time we got back, the fire was well beyond a bucket. And so I had to call the fire department. And that area of woods was charred in my childhood for a while as a sign, as a memory of our mistake. But we didn't get in too much trouble. But yeah. It's a good lesson. Don't set things on fire that you can't put out.
I think setting stuff on fire as a kid is sort of like a rite of passage. Some of the best memories I had with my friends were setting stuff on fire out in the backyard, throwing things into it to see what would happen. All those little science experiments, you can call them. I really do. I think like setting stuff on fire is somewhat of a rite of passage. Some of the best memories come from that. It's also dangerous, but that's what makes it fun, right?
For my house down when I was a kid, I
Purposefully, like you were starting fires for fun, or you like accidentally?
It was an insurance play.
Yeah, exactly. No, it was I was playing with Legos. I grew up playing Legos, after school, similar to what Kyle was saying. Like I feel like there was way less homework back in the day. And so I'd finish my homework real quick, or maybe not even do it at all, but I would just start playing with Legos after school and build these like structures. And then around the 4th of July, we got a bunch of firecrackers and a bunch of fireworks. And so I started like putting these firecrackers and fireworks inside these Lego structures and like blowing them up in my room. And so at one point, like it actually caught the carpet on fire, and I had to put it out, and the whole house smelled. My mom came in, she was like so disappointed, and she was like, "Hey, David, if you're gonna play with fire, do it in the garage, not in your room." And so yeah, I proceeded to blow up more Legos in the garage, but yeah, playing with fire.
I love that she gave you freedom to just push it to the garage. That's a good parenting move.
I think
Yeah,
it is
yeah,
too.
because I mean, I think she knew that I'd play with fire regardless, and so might as well be under her supervision as opposed
Right.
to just somewhere random where I could burn half a forest down.
Well,
Right.
for more parenting tips and arson tips, follow our podcast as we bring new content to you. Kyle, one of the things I hear about with athletes especially is they get to the highest level they're going to play at, whether that's high school, college, maybe even, some sort of professional career. And when that finally calms down or there's no future in that, I often hear that there's sort of a big dopamine crash and a purpose crash where everything they thought they were going to be doing sort of, falls apart and they become directionless. So did that happen for you? And what did you do to sort of fill that void?
Yeah, I would say that that's true. That's true. Because, if you play high school football, that's true. And I think even more college, when you play college sports, and specifically on the Division 1 level, I think even more, they control every aspect of your life. You got times where you're eating, you got film, you got lifting, you got practice, you got games, you got film to film, you got further meetings and analysis. There's so much that you really don't have a say over. And then you have the regular, commitments of just a college student, right? That's already tough. And so when that ends, you stop, you kind of lose the muscle of being able to decide, what am I going to do when I have 4 hours of free time? You really don't have that ever. I remember just coveting, at some points like, okay, I've got an hour from 1:15 to 2:15. That's crazy. I think I can get a nap in. There's just like you long for just spots where you don't have a commitment. And so I think the freedom you experience after that is good, but there's also this sense of like, well, what am I supposed to, how do I decide what to do? And I know a lot of athletes, that can be very difficult for them. They don't know what to do with their life after that.
We discussed a bit of your kind of post-college days right before we kind of kicked this off formally. But you mentioned you joined a desert community called the Sky Gypsies. Dig into that just a little bit. What was that? What drove you to it? And how long were you there?
Yeah, I think this ties into what we were just talking about. I longed for freedom and just trying stuff out. And, a lot of my friends probably made the wiser choices and started doing internships and jumping in with companies and did really well. And I was just kind of curious, what would happen if I didn't have any debt. So I thought, man, can I just explore the world a little bit and just try stuff? I was aware that it was probably a unique time in my life to try different things. And if I fail, if it doesn't work out, you're 22, you're 23, who cares? And so, yeah, I lived with this group, the Sky Gypsies, run by John McAfee of McAfee Virus Scans. And if you can imagine a three-wheeled motorcycle with wings, these people would fly around the desert and camp out and come back. And so I just sent them a message, hey, can I work in your coffee shop and learn from you guys and hang out in the desert? And they said sure. And so lived out there for a little while, and in that time period, yeah, just kind of kicked off a time of exploration. Hitchhiking, wandering around. Lived in Europe for a while. I yeah, hitchhiked from California to Florida. Did a little traveling documentary for PBS. Kind of just took this path of exploration and just to see what would happen.
While you were traveling, how did you sustain yourself? I can't imagine, making coffee for a group called the Sky Gypsies, makes much money.
Yeah, I think you just learn to spend as little as possible. It's amazing how many calories you can find in like a dollar or two burrito. And so I think just, Subway footlongs, Walmart food, you just don't need much. And I was okay, not eating my fill all the time. Buffets help, but yeah, I had a few thousand saved up. And I mean, and part of the cheat of it is a little bit is I knew if things got rough, I could find a way to get back home and I would be okay. So I was okay, living on the edge with not much money and just trying to make it work. Have you guys gotten to travel out to the desert at all?
Yeah,
Where is you,
usually for
Caleb?
golf.
There you go.
I mean, Matthew lives in the desert.
I do.
So I've been down to the desert in Utah, the desert in Arizona. I really love spending time down in Tucson. So I have some familiarity with it, but not in terms of living there long term.
Yeah, it's kind of a
Yeah.
magical. There's something magic about it. It's because in a sense it's dead, right? There's not a lot of life there inherently, but as you kind of sit there, man, you see like the life that is there is super resilient and yeah, there's just a beauty about it.
Absolutely. And we one of our first trips when we got our trailer, our RV before we traveled around in it for a while, it was just the closest thing to our house in Colorado that we could go to in boondocks. We went out into the middle of the desert over by the sand dunes in Colorado and just camped out with our family. And it was the kids were really, really young then, and so it was just the kids were just playing in the sand outside the trailer. But you're right, there was something kind of refreshing about like being the only ones out there. It's just kind of the desert around you. There's nothing else. There's no trees, animals. You're just kind of out there. The stars are beautiful whenever you're out in a place like that, and it's just I don't know. It is weirdly refreshing, more than you'd think it would be to be in the middle of the desert when you've got nothing else to kind of do or focus on other than just be present there.
Right. Yeah, it is special. And it's amazingly quiet. too. I don't know if you noticed that, but it was one of the few places where I feel like if you're just quiet, like you don't hear trees rustling in the wind, you don't hear leaves. It's just dead silent. There's almost like this deafening sound of silence that I found was pretty interesting.
I've always found there's an eerie beauty to it because you're in an area that is primarily death. There's very little life in the desert. Of course, once you
Mhm.
know what to look for, you can find it. But even when I play golf out there, it's beautiful, and the golf always feels a little bit unnatural because grass doesn't grow out there. So to actually
Mm.
put fairways and greens and tee boxes sort of interrupts the beauty of the desert. And then it's one of the other unsettling pieces is there's a lot that can kill you. There's rattlesnakes, scorpions, all kinds of critters that we don't have here in Indiana. Indiana, it's pretty safe. I don't think there's any poisonous snakes to worry about. And so it's just a different mentality when you're down there going, this is not my habitat. I should be a little more cautious.
Yeah.
100%. Yeah.
Hey Kyle, so you mentioned earlier that you went into gypsy mode and you did all these different things, and at the end you realized that freedom came from commitment and relationships, not just from changing your scenery every few months. What habits sort of took place as you started to settle down? I'm assuming there are some things that you started getting into the rhythm and cadence of doing once you started to stay more stationary and stay put.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember I was living in Germany and I was playing football out there and I found myself very, very dry. And I think partly I would have said that, and I'd still say I probably default to being an introvert, but I still found that I longed for community. I longed for friends to, share life with in a consistent way. And I found that a bit, and there's some churches out there that I would go to, but still you're there for 6 months and then you go somewhere else, and I would travel around and you go back there for 6 months for another season, and I I moved to St. Louis, and I think a habit that it sounds very normal and plain, but for me, a revolutionary habit was just being somewhere and committing to a group of people. And so for me, I found that in, the church that I was attending, there's just something about saying, "Hey, I'll see you next week. I'll um, I'll see you at Bible study on Wednesday. Hey, let's grab coffee." Something about having people and place, sounds very plain and normal to us now, but to me, that was mind blowing. It's like, wait, you just commit to people and you commit to a place and a group and you just go to the same job every day. I found that, so refreshing and so delightful just to commit. And so that in itself was its own habit. That was difficult for me to pursue because you still get that itch of wanting to do something different and what's the next adventure. But yeah, commitment itself is its own discipline and habit that was new to me.
Matthew, are you going to bring up the Jocko Willink quote at this point?
Wait, which Jocko Willing quote?
Discipline equals freedom.
Oh, the
Yeah.
discipline equals freedom, the title of his book. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I think that's really cool that you've kind of found that. That's something that Jordan Peterson, another guy, also always focuses on all the time. Is that a lot of times fulfillment isn't ever found in these momentary things of pleasure or happiness, but it's found in commitment to something greater than yourself. And when you're committed and actually responsible for something, that's normally when we find the most fulfillment. And so, like you said, when you're bouncing around all over the place, you'll have little bits of joy here and there, and you'll be happy for moments. But the long term, just deep fulfillment, I think, really comes from, like you said, committing to a group of people, to a person, to a family, and then taking responsibility and having responsibility put on you to where it's something where you're not just looking after yourself, but you have responsibility for others and the well-being of others. I think really does lead to kind of like you said, the most long-term fulfillment. So it's really cool that you've stumbled upon that, doing both of those and kind of seeing the difference there.
Yeah, that's well said, Matthew. I mean, someone else has articulated it as freedom and boundaries, right? There's something about, boundaries and structure that, they would say gives room for good things to run wild. when there are no boundaries, when there is no structure. Um, I think a lot of people, me included, don't do as well. And so there's something about just saying, hey, this is my space, these are my people. It really, I think, encourages thriving for humans.
I think there's two very core pieces to freedom. We've talked about it a little bit before, but there's freedom from, which I think is
Hmm.
what most of us start off with. I don't want to have to go and answer to a boss. I want financial freedom. I want the ability to travel. And then there's freedom to. And so it's not just, I don't want to be stuck in an oppressive 9 to 5 job, right? I want freedom from that. But then you start asking the bigger questions is, all right, what is this freedom for? And what can I do with this? And that's what really opens up, I think, for most people, rather than I'm just running away from slavery, well, however you view that, to freedom. And then the bigger questions go, and I think you hit on it in the intro, was you were sort of feeling directionless when you were out with the gypsies. It's like, hey, the world's my oyster, but where's my home? Where do I settle in? Where do I kind of find that fulfillment with other people? And it sounds like you made some decisions and sort of settled in. Along those lines, let's flash forward to your current life today. So you mentioned you have three kids plus one on the way. So congrats. I think, assuming that was all planned. And then you also run three businesses and you're a part-time pastor. One of the times I came down, we got to go see you preach, which was quite a treat. So why don't you fill us in a little bit of what your life looks like today and just give us an overall glimpse of those three businesses?
Yeah, three businesses. One is our book company. This is probably your fault, Caleb, that our family is involved in this. But we started out working mainly with college bookstores, and we buy older textbooks and resell them in the marketplace or resell them to wholesalers. And so that we have a little warehouse that we spend a lot of time in. I love my kids they love the book warehouse. And second business, we have an eye clinic. My wife's a eye doctor, and she was working for a private practice. And at some point, we said, "Hey, what if we just start our own, build our own culture, build our own space?" And so that started in 2020. We thought, "Hey, year of the eye, it's perfect, 2020." And then they're like, "Hey, why don't you guys stop working and shut down for a while?" But we made it. We made it through that, and then we have a shop equipment company as our third business. We work with new car dealerships. They all kind of use these same things: floor soap, hand cleaner, parts washer solvent, parts washer machines, and we come in and say, hey, we'll provide all those things and on a kind of monthly or a yearly contract basis and normalize the invoice and make it easy on them. So, three not super related industries, but yeah,
How,
we look for it.
Kyle, that's really surprising that you have three businesses in, seemingly unrelated industries. How do you keep track of everything that's going on in all those different businesses?
Yeah, I don't know that I am doing it well, but I think there's a few things that have worked for us. I have to keep things siloed. So, I have separate email inboxes, separate Slacks. I try and keep if I can, keep the worlds separate. I don't know if you guys remember a show Quantum Leap, but this is kind of a 90s show in the Hercules Xena warrior era. But every day this guy wakes up and he's in someone's body, and it could be like, a 1820s maid in Britain, or could be, a construction worker, 1940s New York, and he wakes up and he has to figure out what are the problems, what do I have to solve. I kind of feel like that. I wake up and I go to the warehouse and okay, there's this own set of problems, and but these employees, they have no idea down the road about these other 10 employees at the eye clinic and what they're going through, and they're all kind of separate worlds. And so I keep them separate, but then I've found having some consistent lines, like I have one bookkeeper that runs across them all, and one CPA, and so that helps keep it together. And yeah, a few kind of software tools that help keep them separate for me.
It's definitely a lot to keep track of. That's admirable and also stressful all at the same time. When we did the pre-call and we kind of were kicking around some of the habits that you carry, especially knowing with the three kids and one on the way and the three businesses, I thought we'd kind of center around time management or productivity or efficiency. And the most of the skills you were throwing out really related to health. So you mentioned a little bit of sleep, and then you mentioned the one we're going to really dig into, which is sprinting, which as soon as you said that, I said, yes, let's talk about that because that is so different than most of the traditional health information that you're hearing. So obviously time management's important. You talk about bucketing everything out. Why do you think health is the most important thing for you or the most leveraged thing that you can do? And then we'll kind of dig into some of those specific habits.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. We often say like we talk about our mind and our body as separate things, and there's a sense in which that's true. We all understand that, but I think sometimes we forget that our mind is in our brain, and our brain is in our body, and how the health of our body is just going to affect how we think and work, and the health of our brain, and that affects how you interact with people. I think it affects how you work, how you relate to your family. And so I've found that pursuing health is something that leverages everything else. I'm not saying it's the meaning of life, but I think there's something really powerful about caring for your body in a way that does affect the other parts of your life. And yeah, and you mentioned sprinting. For me, that exercise is a big part of that for me.
Yeah, I love the aspect of going upstream. If you take care of your mind and you can eat well and make sure your brain has the right energy to perform your tasks. But if you kind of let the vehicle or the body sort of deteriorate, then you can only think so well and your brain can only function so well. So I love that concept of going upstream. Of course, having some natural intelligence is good and working on some brain habits is phenomenal as well. But I do love the aspects of the body. So let's hone in on sprinting. Where did that specific habit come from? And why do you think it's one of the most leveraged things that you can do?
Yeah. Yeah, it's such a fascinating topic, I think, because it's not talked about very often as an outlet for people. We hear a lot about, your 3Ks, your 5Ks, your marathons, your Ironmans. Sprinting isn't often pushed, but yeah, I I li- I like to make the argument that I think it's the best thing you can do for your body. For me, it was something I enjoyed. I never really enjoyed distance work or distance running. I know a lot of people do, and I respect that. I just didn't enjoy it, and so it was something that I wanted to, continue to pursue, and so I, continued to just kind of keep that skill after football, and kind of stayed competing in different sprint events, and still compete in those. But yeah, the argument I think for sprinting is it's unique in what it can do for the body. You know, I think one way to think about it is if you look at a pro athlete in any sport, you can start to see what that exercise will do for you, because this is what they do, 40, 60 hours a week. So, if you look at a professional swimmer, well, swimming a lot is going to push you towards that. You look at a pro CrossFitter, that's where, your body's going to start to navigate towards. And I think if you look at a marathoner, that's, what your body's going to push towards. And if you look at a sprinter, those guys look different. And that's where your body starts to navigate towards. And for me, it's not an aesthetic thing. I found that, and the research will tell you, there's nothing more taxing for the body than a sprint. Just physiologically, there's really no debate about it. An all-out sprint is the most taxing thing on your body, and because of that, it creates a unique response from the body. Have
So
you heard that before?
not really, but so are you just going out and sprinting as fast as you can? Are you doing intervals? Like what does this look like and how often are you doing it? Let's just kind of set the stage before we get into some of the science here.
Yeah, yeah. So kind of practical look, most people, especially adults, you can't, it's difficult to sprint more than 2, 3 times a week. because it is so taxing and it does require multiple days for a lot of people. And so I'd say for most people, 1, 2, 3 days a week, pushing that 2 to 3 day range with good rest is good. So yes, this is an all-out sprint. So 95 to 100% is what you're going to push towards. For most people, very short, 20 to 30 meters for a start, or kind of a build up into a 10-meter all-out segment is another kind of high leverage movement. And you'll find, as many of my distance friends when they come run with me, very trained people, but if you sprint, you'll find that it's just a different movement, and they're often, very sore and very tired for multiple days just from a few seconds of sprinting. Just a little bit of exposure, can really do some interesting things to the body.
So I'm aware of Wolff's Law, which applies more to bones, but it's the concept of if you stress something, it will grow or you'll have
Mhm.
gains. I'm
Mhm.
assuming something similar plays a role here in the sprinting world.
Yeah, right. So, if you look at the forces that are applied in the body, and you can redirect me here if you want, but now what we can do is we can put force plates under treadmills, and so we can track what are the forces that are applied in each step of these of anybody. But they've tested most elite sprinters, and what you'll find is for elite sprinters, they're putting 5 to 6 times their body weight in each step. That's the amount of newtons that hit. And so the stress that comes into your body from those hits in a short amount of time. So each step for an average person is they're gonna be on the ground for probably 0.12, 0.14 seconds. So just a tenth of a second when you're striking that ground. And in that little strike, we're getting 5 to 6 times your body weight for elite guys, probably 3 to 4 for the rest of us. And so the shock to the body is so great. You might notice when you watch Olympic sprinters, you'll see like Usain Bolt, and it looks like he's pulling away towards the end of the race, the last 30 meters of the race. But the reality is they're all slowing down. It's just that Usain Bolt is slowing down less. So the human body cannot sprint and hold speed longer than 6 or 7 seconds, just because of the way our ATP systems work, or anaerobic systems. Everyone slows down, even the elite guys. And so because it's just so taxing, and so Bolt is great, and the great sprinters just slow down less than the other guys, but it's inevitable.
Is that something that you can improve over time? The time that you can sprint, does that increase with practice?
It definitely does, yeah. So for a lot of it improves partly because you can hold force outputs longer, but another part of it is if you run faster, kind of counterintuitively, it takes you longer to get there. So for example, for a kid, they're going to reach top speed around 20 yards or less, and so from there they're going to start to slow down. Once you hit top speed, they're going to be slowing down at 30, 40 yards, even though it doesn't seem like it. But if you track the 10-meter intervals, you can see it. And so you can improve that by getting faster because it takes you longer to get to top speed. But yeah, and then just kind of improving form, improving mechanics is going to allow you to kind of keep high force outputs for long periods of time.
You mentioned that it's there's nothing more taxing than sprinting. I think about sprinting, and I'm just thinking, at least personally, I'm just thinking about my knees. I'm like, man, that sounds really tough on your knees. Are there any negative side effects from sprinting, or maybe even sprinting incorrectly?
Yeah, it is a higher. I think the negatives could, there's probably a higher risk of hamstring injury, but I would say for a lot of people, the sprinters that I know, I'm in the kind of the masters sprinting community, and we're adjacent to kind of the distance people that compete at the same meets. A lot of the injuries that I see are from overuse injuries from distance running. And so you think about, running a mile, running 2 miles, 5 miles, the ground contacts you're hitting are, just relentless. They're over and over and over. Whereas a sprint, you're saying, hey, I'm going to run 20 steps and rest get max rest and wait 4 minutes until I can run fully again. And it's just not a lot of the forces are great, but the impact, the repetitive impact is much less. And so I'd say it's less risky, but I'm biased. So
Interesting. So is there any like sort of beef when you go to these meets where the sprinters are like looking down at the long distance guys being like, "Oh, that's an inferior sport," and the long distance guys are looking at the sprinters and being like, "Oh, you only have to run 20 steps?"
right. Yeah, I think maybe early on, but now for us old guys, when I go to these masters meets where you compete against people in your age group. It's one big community, and it's really fascinating to see people that, they kind of have on their calendar, hey, we got national masters championships coming up. I got this regional meet coming up. Everybody shows up, and you see these people at different meets, and there's really no time to have beef when you're 45 and running running sprints. It's good to see other people, but there's definitely they're definitely different worlds for sure.
There's this stat that I've seen thrown around. I'm sure you've heard about this stat before. I'm not sure if it's made up or not, but the stat is that I think it's 95% of people after the age of 30 will never all out sprint again in their life. Have you ever heard that stat before?
I've not heard that one, but that sounds consistent. Um,
It seems crazy to me that would be actually true. I can't find a verifiable place I've looked before to see if it's like a scientific study, but it's kind of a widely accepted thing. It looks like that most people will never all out sprint again after they turn 30 or after they're past the age of 30, which is just kind of insane to me how, like you said, there's so many health benefits from doing something like that, and it pushes your body so much physically. And most people will most likely never do that again once they get to 30, which isn't even that old, all things considered. And so it's crazy to me that something as simple as that doesn't even take that much time and is pretty easy, relatively speaking, to do time-wise. Because like you said, it's not like doing a 10-mile run where you've got to commit 2 hours or an hour of time or something like that. It can be done in a short period of time, and most people will never do it again in their lives. It's just crazy to think about.
yeah, no, you're right. It is strange, and I guess part of it is we don't have a reason to, but unless you're going to catch your kid down the road on a bike, or you're running from someone else, or running to chase someone else, you don't often find a reason to go into an all-out sprint. But when you need it. And that's one reason I have such a high view of it. Have you heard of Peter Attia's model for health span? Have you guys heard of that?
Yep,
I know
medicine
Peter
3.0.
Attia.
What'd you say, Matt?
I said I know Peter Attia. I'm not familiar necessarily with what you were talking about though right there. What was it?
Yeah. Well, so he kind of, I mean, you guys can redirect me, but he makes this argument that what you want is not really lifespan that is good. He says that you want health span. So you want the ability to function at a high level for longer. So what do you do to keep health span? Well, he makes this argument in favor of sprinting and explosive movement. What he says is, you know, if you track longevity, people that can move well when they're older, what is happening? It's like, well, how do you lose it? Well, at first you can sprint when you stop sprinting at your 30, when you're 30. Then soon you can only jog because you don't go back the other way. And then what happens? Well, you stop jogging, and then all you can do is walk. And then, well, walking normally and with spunk is difficult, and so you move to shuffling. And then once you shuffle, it's a really difficult path, and soon you fall and you break your hip, and things don't go well. And so his argument is that the best way to keep health span, just from a physical exercise perspective, is to keep the extremes. And so he would argue that if you want to be able to jog for long, older in your age, you have to hold on to sprinting because you have nothing else to protect you once you lose sprinting. Jogging is your final bastion. He says if you want to be able to, walk and be able to move around and cut, he's like, well, you got to be able to jump high or to jump with high effort. And so once you lose the ability to jump and to sprint and to do the extremes, your abilities can only condense tighter. You start moving to jogging to walking. And so the way to keep the things in the middle is to hold the extremes on the edges. That's his argument. And, you know, I think I agree with it. I remember one of the first meets I went to, the Masters National Championships, and I started seeing people that do this, for long periods of time in their life, that they've committed decades to just showing up to meets and running or sprinting. And I was blown away personally. I was in early 30s, but I was like, that guy, I started trying to guess. I saw that I was wrong about ages repeatedly because I started seeing people, and then you can see their age group on their little, banner or their chest number. And I started seeing that I was wrong about ages over and over. I see women, I'm like, okay, I think she's 33. Like, no, she's 53. Or I'd see, older people. I saw a guy that, like a 70-plus-year-old long jumping, like running into a long jump pit and jumping into the pit. And he was in his 70s. He didn't look 70 because he was jumping. I saw, these 40, 50-year-old sprinters that just, looked like the peak of health. And so for me, I was like, okay, there's something beyond me just enjoying it. There's something physiologically there, and you guys can look this up, but there's all types of studies. Now there was a meta-analysis recently that showed that sprinting, that compared fat loss from sprinting versus intervals and sprinting versus steady state cardio, and they found that I think it was 42% more fat loss for sprinting than intervals. And it was I think it was about 90% more fat loss for sprinting versus steady state cardio.
Wait,
With
Kyle,
yeah,
sorry to interrupt, but I've got
yeah,
a silly question. So
yeah.
you're talking about sprinting and how quick it is. Like, what does a typical sprinting session look like? I'm just imagining a big field and you just sprint as quickly as you can, like 3 times. Is that what it looks like? Or
Yeah, it's pretty simple, right? So you got to find your own warm up. You find your own find what allows you to feel prepared to run and sprint. And I think you can do that in 10, 15 minutes. And then from there, there's different ways you can do it. Hill sprints, super safe way to do it. Very, very low injury risk. 20, 30 meters, run up a hill as fast as you can. Do that for 5 reps. Take a break and do it for 5 more reps and you're done. You can do less than
that's
that.
it.
Yeah, really, very short.
And then that's according to studies more effective at fat loss than interval training or just regular cardio.
Yeah. There's a ton of studies out there that'll say the same thing. I saw one recently that had 30-second sprint bouts. I think it's a bit long, but they showed that just doing that 2 to 3 times a week, it was a total of like 6 to 9 minutes of effort. I think that was the one that showed 90% more fat loss than cardio. But the kicker is that it was 30 times less time spent doing it. And so if you have a family, a longer run is going to cost you more family time. A longer bike is going to cost you more family time than a sprint session.
Man, what I love the efficiency element of that, and I love how you've broken that out. It also occurs to me when you're sprinting, you don't really need equipment. I suppose you could do it barefoot. There's probably a whole underground world of barefoot runners or sprinters, but I would imagine a nice pair of tennis shoes and just whatever athletic gear that you have versus trying to, like, I don't really work out a lot. I play a lot of golf. I do run and bike. I did a triathlon this summer just to kind of stay fresh and try to push myself, in part because I did read, I'm halfway through reading Peter Attia's book, Outlive.
Mm.
But there's so much confusion when it comes to lifting weights. And there's hundreds of exercises you can do, and you can certainly hurt yourself if you don't do it properly. And so I just love the simplicity that is sprinting. You don't need a gym membership. You don't need a lot of equipment. So I'm intrigued. Let's put our readers, maybe many of them are kind of in my world where I don't just go out and sprint or work out a lot. Where would I start? So let's kind of make this as practical as we can. What are the just kind of the base steps that would be required just to get this habit started?
Yeah, I think you're right. There is very minimal equipment required. You really don't need much but shoes. I would say if you want to, go for it, I think it is worth spending $30 and getting either spikes or cleats because it just resolves the question in your mind of, am I gonna slip? Am I going to, it's just more likely to do that when you have shoes on, but it's not expensive. $30, cleats, spikes, you can find them anywhere, and that gives you the surety to know that when I strike the ground, I can put everything I have into the ground. And so, yeah, you find a field, you can use spikes or cleats on a field, spikes or cleats on a hill, and or if you have a track, if you're lucky, you might have just an open track from a high school or a college that lets people run on it. That's gold. There's nothing better than that. Being able to use spikes on a track, I mean, hard to beat. If you want to, this is where, this is your own preference. If you want to track improvement, there's there's really no way to do it other than a timer. So I use what's called a free lap timer for a few $100. You can time your splits, and that enables you just to say, hey, I got 5 sprints today. My best 10-meter split is 1.21. I want to get to 1.19 today, and that's all. Or I say I want to run 2 under 1.23. You can make games, you can gamify it. It's super fun because then all you're doing is you're just trying to beat your time. It's like a
Is this
video
a
game.
wearable that you wear on your body, or is it like sensors? Like how are you actually measuring the distance and the time?
Yeah, for a free lap, you just put a little sensor around your waist, and then you set up beacons. You measure out a beacon on a track or on a field, 10 meters apart, 20, whatever. And then as you run by it, it will, click and then acknowledge that you've passed it. And then it sends the data to your phone or in the cloud. And that just enables you to, not everybody's going to do that. And that's me. I like data. I'm motivated by a hundredth of a second. That's interesting to me. But I think just sprinting and getting out there is going to be the base level for most people. But if you like data, if you like knowing, are you getting faster, that's going to give you that information. And for me, I know that if I'm faster, that's an immediate indicator that my body is more primed, healthier. There's improvement there. I can run with my kids more. There's that number matters to me.
For you, Kyle, what have you found is the optimal recovery time for peak performance after a good sprint session to another?
Yeah, I'll take 2 to 3 days. I often won't do it more than 2 all-out sprints in a week, and but you kind of, because there's a muscle fatigue, but there's also a central nervous system fatigue that sprinting affects, that long distance running doesn't affect. And so even if your muscles are recovered, your central nervous system might not be able to fire at the same output. And so part of the reason why a timer is important is because you can see what your output is. But yeah, I think 2 to 3 days for most people is good. It's just starting out 1 to 2 times a week. You can be done in 30, 45 minutes. Incredible impact on your body in just that short amount of time. Interestingly enough, if you talk to elite coaches, a lot of these guys, when they sprint and they're running sub 10-second 100-meter dashes, they need 2 weeks before they can sprint again,
Wow.
because the effect on their body is so great that it would endanger them to try to sprint before that. And so it's just a huge global impact. And then side note, studies will tell you that you'd also get cardio with sprinting. You sprint, you get the power effect, you also get cardio improvement. But it doesn't go the other way. You're not going to get, just by doing cardio, you don't get the power and the anaerobic and the muscle building that comes with sprinting.
Kyle, from your perspective, how much of it is genetic versus, again, training for, good performance?
Yeah, I mean, there's no doubt if you've read, the sports gene, and you can see that genetics plays a role, but it there's been muscle tissue. When we talk about genetics, what people are most often talking about is, do you have fast twitch or slow twitch fibers? And everybody kind of has a variety, a mixture of that. And they've done these analysis on, even there's a study I saw on current NFL players where they do little, non-invasive biopsies to see their fast twitch, slow twitch. and they found that, you know, there's a lot of slow twitch guys in the NFL that just learn to be great. And but regardless, even if you are slow twitch, dominant, you can still improve your own body. You can still get faster at sprinting. And so maybe you're not going to be in the Olympics, but I think none of us are going to be in the Olympics right now, right? At 40. We're just trying to optimize our own life. And so maybe your ceiling in theory is lower than, some other elite guy, but you can improve your own state. And we don't know where our ceiling is.
One other practical question, Kyle. Do you recommend running on grass, or is pavement okay if I've got like a neighborhood I could run in?
I the recommendation for most people would be that pavement is okay in doses, but for 2 to 3 times a week, you're going to want to try to find grass or track because the forces into cement are just a bit much. But it's not something you should never do. I do it sometimes, but I think as a pattern, I would move towards grass or track.
Yeah, that makes sense in terms of preserving the joints. Do you also then lift weights and do cardio and do other things, or is sprinting the only thing that you do?
I do zero cardio. That's a little bit controversial, but the most jogging I do will be sometimes if I run a lap before I sprint, and often I don't do that. I'm not opposed to cardio. I just don't enjoy it, and my conviction is that I've got enough benefit from sprinting to that, or that's enough for me on the cardio side. I don't find myself winded, playing with my kids and playing other sports. But also, it just matters what you enjoy. Some people love the meditative distance running of cardio, and so no disrespect to that. But yeah, I don't do. Oh, do I lift weights? Yeah, I do lift weights. I kind of default towards heavier lifts if you can, low rep, heavier lifts, whatever your capacity is. And for me, it's organized around I want to lift in ways that make me faster. I don't do a lot of upper body, and I don't do just general lifting just to get bigger and stronger.
I like it. Sort of bring that efficiency moment into everything you're doing. So when you're out there sprinting, chasing hundreds of seconds and pushing yourself and sort of raising your ceiling, do you find that spills over into other aspects of your life as a dad, a husband, and as a business owner?
I do. I do. I mean, one, just the physiological effects. I just feel great after a sprint session. And if I'm consistently sprinting, my baseline for just how I feel, I think is going to be higher. Yeah, I mean, the family impact I think is unique because one, you can bring your kids to it. If you go on a long run, it's hard to bring your kids. And so hey, come out and run with me. Plus, it's just the research will tell you it's just better for kids to sprint than it is for them to do any kind of drudge work. So yeah, there's that. I think, and I'm a data guy. I think I like tracking it and I like seeing improvement. And I think there's some crossover to business there of just thinking about like, what are my KPIs? What are the main things that I care about for my business? What are the main times I'm looking for my body? I think all that, is going to have crossover, but I think just overall, my body's going to be healthier, my mind's going to be healthier, and that's going to affect everything else.
I think that's phenomenal. So if somebody does want to get started, what's a book or two or a website or somebody that you can follow that's influential? Like what's a good just sort of starting point for someone that says, all right, I'm intrigued. I like the idea of how efficient this is. I want to try and maybe think about this habit for myself. How do they get started?
Yeah, there's a lot of great guys out there. There's a guy named Tony Holler who he kind of developed this system called Feed the Cats, and he is a high school sprint coach, and he's kind of turned the track field upside down because track traditionally has been like, hey, you got to run these in order to get ready to sprint. You got to build your cardio base and run a bunch of miles. And Tony has developed the simpler system where it's like, hey, what do cats do? What do lions do? They relax a lot, they rest a lot, and then they sprint. and then they rest a lot and they sleep and they eat and then they sprint. And he does that with his track athletes, and they've got a lot of great results where they have very minimal volume. He's a guy I would look up. Guy named Dan Pfaff, Pfaff is probably our kind of our generation's legendary track coach, and he's an Olympic guy that has a lot of great philosophy and practical application for sprints. I would start with those two guys.
Cool. And we'll link to those in the show notes as well. So if you're listening along and need help tracking those down, just check the notes and there will be links to those. As we seek to wind this up, David, Matthew, any other questions related to that, or is that kind of the last little bit we want to share here on sprinting?
Yesterday morning, I went down to. I live in a high rise. I live on the 11th floor of a high rise, and I went down to the first floor to toss my recycling away. And I decided to take the stairs because the elevator was busy. And I tried sprinting up the elevator. This prior to like me seeing your email or anything. I just wanted to try it. And I swear I could only get to floor 5 before I was just like absolutely winded. And I could barely walk after that. Now, I think that's just like difficult to do anyway. Do you think that's going to give me the similar benefits of sprinting, or am I just like totally off?
No, stadiums are great. They're similar to hills, and but they provide. You can say, hey, I'm going to run 5 reps of 3 flights or whatever, and there's a great benefit to that. You can hop up those steps, and plyometrics are a great thing to add in there. But no, you're right on. I think it's a great supplement to sprinting for sure.
Well, and David, you have the added benefit of living at elevation in the Denver, of course. So you're 5,000 feet above sea level versus, Kyle and I are probably 600 to 800 feet above sea level. So the lack of oxygen is going to benefit you that much more with whatever you're doing.
Yeah,
absolutely.
I'd probably be winded too, David. That's impressive.
I'm going to try again in a few days, see if I can make it to 6.
Yes.
Yeah, you should time yourself to see how fast can you get at five flights.
I wasn't timing myself, but I'll time it next time I do it, and I'll send it to you guys. It felt pretty fast. It felt a lot faster than waiting for the elevator, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Well, David, you can work on flights of stairs, and I'll work on flights of beers next time we meet up, and we'll see who gets more benefit out of it.
Probably you.
I might get more enjoyment, but you'll probably get more health span.
Yeah, probably.
Matthew, any final thoughts or questions from you?
No, not really. I love the topic. I tried sprinting back when I was traveling the RV because it was one of the only things I could do since it didn't have a gym, and running really wasn't an option back then because of the issue with having a shin splints. And I loved it. I don't know why I actually got out of the habit. Thinking about it as you're talking about it, remembering I did like 60 days of sprinting to see kind of what would happen. And I loved the results. I loved doing it. I loved how little time it took compared to spending 2 hours in the gym. But just with traveling and everything else, I got out of the habit of it. I never really got back in the habit. Right now, I'm running like 2-mile loops every few days, just jogging. But I'm considering replacing that with sprinting. You've kind of convinced me of the benefits of that, so I might get back into that. So it's been a little eye-opening for me listening to that, and yeah, I want to get back into it. I don't know why I got out in the first place. So
well, a good halfway if you want to try is intervals as well, and that's in your jog, you can amp it up to 85%. And then take a longer recovery jog, and there's some great benefits to that as well.
Yeah, that'd be a great in between ground to kind of transition over, or just get a little bit of a different workout from the same 2-mile loop. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I have 5 kids, and I took my 10-year-old on a 5-mile bike ride to go to the coffee shop because that's how you bribe 10-year-olds is with caffeine, I guess. And on the way back, she was kind of throwing a fit. Let's call mom, and I'm done. She kind of was tapping out. So I love the element of sprinting. At worst, you're 30, 40, 50 feet away from your kids, and so they can be out there with you. If they want to quit at any point, you're not several miles from home. You're just right there in the park or the field. So that's
Right.
intriguing to me as well. I'll be honest. I didn't. I love talking to you, Kyle, and I love picking your brain. When I knew we were going to talk about sprinting, I'm like, this one scares me because it sounds like hard work. But I'm like Matthew. I'm intrigued. I'm definitely going to look into it a little more. I'm like you where the metrics matter and the numbers matter. So I'll probably start with something simple like a wristwatch. And I don't want to, throw a couple $100 down just to do something I may only do a few times. But I'm intrigued, and I'll probably be sharing some screenshots or something with you, and you can laugh at my horrendously slow times right out of the gate.
Please send me your times. I would love to see yeah, a before and after, or just how your times progress. If you get a yeah, consistent distance, or an area that you sprint, I would love to see how that progresses.
What is the most standard sprinting distance? Like if I was to go and just benchmark something, what is like the most common length?
Well, for on an Olympic level, the 100-meter dash is the classic, right? But a 40-yard dash, you're going to see that as a standardized time everywhere. I think even a 20-yard, I run a ton of 20s, which is super low, super low volume. That's one of my favorite distances. And so I'd say 20, 40, or 100 is long. Get some sprinting in before you do 100, just to make sure you know, have some exposure to high speeds. But
What's the
Well,
main
yeah,
so
distance in the NFL Combine? What is that they always sprint? Do you know?
the 40-yard dash.
40-yard dash? Okay.
So if it's good enough for NFL players, I think it should be good enough for us. I'm willing to throw down a gauntlet, David and Matthew. I think we should, make sure we stretch and warm up first so we don't, blow a hammy. But I think we should go out this week and measure our 40-yard distance times, and we can do it with a phone or with a stopwatch. Like it doesn't have to be, with equipment. Let's benchmark that and then give ourselves, I don't know, what's long enough? 2 weeks, 4 weeks, maybe a month, and get close to Christmas time frame, and see who has the most improvement. We can let listeners bet on it or something. But I'd be willing to throw, dinner into the mix or something, just as a challenge for us to be guinea pigs on sprinting.
It's gonna be
So
hard
is
to find
who's the
100.
fastest or who has the better improvement on
I would say
themselves
better improvement.
on their own time?
Yep. So we'd benchmark, and then we'd have to say whether it's going to be a percentage of that or just a straight, time. So we'll have to kind of formulate the rules here. But I would say the bet would be go out, benchmark, run it 3 times in a row, take your average or your middle time or something, and then try and do that again in a month or 6 weeks. So long enough to put a little training in and just see if who gets the most gains.
Yeah, but what if I'm already at an elite level, Like you said, it's like 75 stroke to
Well,
70
then
in
you
golf is
shouldn't.
way different than like 100.
If you're at an elite level, you
Uh,
should just say no to the bet right now.
That's a great idea. I'm so excited to see what your times are. That's going to be fun.
Well, if anybody wants to watch slightly middle-aged, software men push themselves, I think that's what we're going to be setting this up for.
Is that the name of your podcast, Slightly Middle-Aged Software Men?
It is, yeah. Actually, we're
it
going to
should be.
rebrand it
Should
after
be.
this. Well,
That's
Kyle, thanks for coming on. I think it's really fascinating in the health space. I know that you've got a lot of really research thing. The fact that you were mentioning peer-reviewed studies in the middle of our conversation kind of speaks to your love of data and how much you get into the weeds. So I really appreciate that. I love having you as a friend. I like picking your brain, and I look forward to the next random time I stop through Northwest Arkansas and we can meet up for some really good coffee or food again. So we really appreciate your time, and we'll get this up soon. There'll be a link to the show notes. One last question for you, Kyle, is if anybody's listening to the show, they're local, they want to come hear you preach or learn more about business or compete in a sprint off, what's the best way for someone to track you down, if you don't mind sharing that publicly?
Yeah, my email is the best way to contact me. It's kyle.w.horne, Horne, @gmail.com. Yeah, I'll respond to every email I get. And yeah, if you're local, we can come run.
Perfect. Well, with that, thanks so much for coming on. And if you liked what you heard today, be sure to like and subscribe. Tell your friends. We are fairly early in the process, but every little bit of sharing helps. And that is how we will leave it. So thanks so much. Take care.
Thanks, guys.